Hello, my name is Daniel Schoonmaker. I'm the Executive Director of West Michigan Sustainable Business Forum, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our presentation today. For those that are not familiar with the organization, Michigan Sustainable Business the Forum is a collaboration of businesses and institutions dedicated to promoting sustainable business practice with a focus on climate leadership, social justice, circular economy, and community resilience. This is part of our series of online discussions on how the coronavirus pandemic is impacting sustainability and sustainable business. Upcoming webinars include next week's presentation, Understanding Implementing Business Continuity Planning with Wendy Schlett of Sustainable Research Group, David Mill of Intertech Business Insurance, and Jernan Gorney of Buren Electric. And that will actually end our sustainability in the coronavirus series, and then we move into our annual meeting on June 22nd, which will feature a panel of sustainability experts discussing key and emerging issues, and our annual business meeting. Videos of today's program and the prior sessions will be available on demand at no cost. However, there will be a brief interruption in the availability of those as we switch over our webinar system over the next week. We will be sending out an update link to that when the new home for those do become available. This series and all of our programs are primarily funded through membership donations. If you're not yet a member of our organization, I'd encourage you to become one. There has never been a better time to do so or a greater need. To that effect, I'd like to recognize our renewing corporate members today. Fay and Zalstra LLC, Howell Board of Public Works, and Nichols. You may also be interested in learning about our various working groups, including those with upcoming meetings in June, such as our Climate Leadership Working Group, which will meet this coming Monday, our Sustainability and Equity Working Group, and our Green Stormwater Infrastructure Group, all which meet next week. If you're interested in those, please feel free to send us an email or just send us a direct message via the chat function today. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists for our program today: design implications for a post-COVID workplace. All of our panelists today are experts with Fishbeck, a Grand Rapids-based engineering, architecture, environmental service, and construction management company, which has 14 offices throughout Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio, is a longtime valued member of the forum. Please welcome our panelists today: Ted Perron, Senior Mechanical Engineer; Lisa Galdis, Senior Interior Designer; and Steve Romkema, Design Architect. Thank you all for joining us today. For our attendees, please note that you can share thoughts with the panelists or all attendees through the chat function. You may also ask questions through the Q&A field, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. We will have plenty of time at the end of the presentations for an open and question period. Ted, Lisa, and Steve will be speaking to us today about how the workplace will change in response to COVID-19 and how organizations can better respond to the new normal for a safe return, future growth, and sustainability. Steve, I see you're sharing. I see you're sharing your screen. At this point, I'm gonna turn it over to you, Ted and Lisa.
Okay, great. This is Ted Perron, and thank you very much for that introduction. And it's glad to have everybody here with us today for the Michigan Sustainable Business Forum and the topic today of the post-COVID workplace. And as already mentioned, I'm Ted Perron, Senior Mechanical Engineer with 15 years of experience and 12 of those right here at Fishbeck. And thank you for the words on Fishbeck. We are one of the top ranked engineering and design firms in the nation, where the unique approach that we take with our services is to truly have an all-in-one mindset. And When I say that, that's, I think, about as true a statement as I can make in regard to what we offer as services. With today's webinar on the workplace, we have an architectural focus, although the topic does have implications for mechanical systems, which we will touch on as well, just briefly. You're going to hear from two of our top designers, as already introduced, Steve Romkema and Lisa Galdis. Steve is an architect with 13 years of experience in space planning, design, and interiors, just to name a few things. Steve has a Fitwell certification, which is important here as it focuses on user well-being. And he, along with many others at Fishbeck, are lead design professionals. And I'll say this about Steve, what he does at Fishbeck, he does it very well. And then Lisa is a senior interior designer with 15 years of experience in commercial design and furniture procurement. Her primary focus is how interior design integrates with the overall architecture and function of a space. And she takes a holistic design approach to layouts. And I'm going to quote her, she hates it when everyone stays in their lane. And what she means by that is that our designs have to be integrated across disciplines, and she takes that very seriously. And this is something I actually appreciate about both Steve and Lisa, that their attention to details, even beyond their own and outside of their own disciplines, are important to them. They really do care about solutions that are not just best for themselves, but are best for everyone, even the lowly mechanical engineer. So in keeping with Fishbeck's all-in-one approach, both Steve and Lisa do a good job at finding the best solutions for everyone. And with that, let's dive in and get this going. And we'll start off with Steve.
Steve, you're going to need to unmute yourself.
How about this?
Thank you, sir.
Before we get into the details of our topic today, we're going to take a moment to talk about how Fishbeck is approaching COVID and why at this point in time, when we're really looking at returning to the workplace, why we're talking about what is the workplace beyond COVID. So we're naturally predisposed to approach situations in a very reactionary manner. So as COVID pops up, we scramble to find solutions to address it. But we have to assume that at some point COVID is going to pass in one way or another. And at that point, we're going to have to scramble again to address the post-COVID workplace. Every time we do that, we end up investing resources, whether it's monetary, human capital, material resources, to address the situations. And what we want to do is make sure that when we do spend that money, we're spending it in the best way and that we're not producing significant excess waste as we transition through these different periods. A good example of that lately has been the interest in plexiglass partitions and the use of those, where you can spend a significant sum of money and material installing them, but then you're only going to tear them down moving forward as we transition out of COVID. So to address that, we like to switch up the process a little bit and really take a jump to the end and start looking at that post-COVID workplace and identify those trends that are going to be much longer lasting to inform how we respond to COVID in the short term. I look at it as if you have $100,000 to spend, how do you invest that money in ways that create the greatest return on investment while limiting our impact on resources and the environment? So to that end, today, we have our primary focus on that post-COVID workplace. And what we're bringing here is a multidisciplinary team that can address this in a very multidisciplinary way, as COVID and all health concerns are very complex. The latest, one of the big things that we've been dealing with COVID is social spacing and social distancing, and that's a very architectural and interiors-driven response, but it doesn't necessarily consider things like airflow within a space and how mechanical systems may impact that. So as we look at these things, we're really considering them holistically, not just as individual elements of a larger issue. As Ted mentioned, today's focus is primarily going to be on the architectural interior side, with some commentary from Ted on the mechanical side as well. So to get us rolling, what we're bringing today is 3 predictions on what we see as the long-lasting impacts of COVID. The first one being an increase in remote work. Then we can look at a refocusing, if you will, on disease transmission within the workplace. And then finally, a need for agile workplaces. None of these are new. These are actually all trends that we've been seeing for the last number of years, transitioning in these directions anyways. COVID is simply acting as a catalyst to speed up the adoption of these. And that's probably most true with our first prediction of a increase of remote work. We were all, or a lot of us at least, were forced almost overnight as we adapted to quarantining guidelines and the safe work guidelines to the working from home. And in our discussions with our clients, looking at third-party data, everything is suggesting that this is going much better than what people may have expected it to before, and that it's a trend that many see continuing and an incentive that they see and an advantage they see that they can offer their employees moving forward. A couple weeks ago, the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, Stanford University, and the University of Chicago Booth School of Business released a study that they did on business leaders' perspective on how remote working will be moving forward. They're suggesting up to a 3 times increase. It varies by market, but all markets that responded were definitely in favor of increasing remote working. As I mentioned, that degree of change will vary between the different industries, but it is universal amongst the industries. So the real question then becomes, what does this mean and what impact does this have on our workplaces?
Different organizations will have different needs or reasons to be in the office based on how they work and even the type of work they do. It could be something that is task-oriented, related to technology, or more collaborative in nature, where meeting face-to-face is more advantageous. Some of the top reasons people choose to work from the office include greater access to technology, more impromptu interactions, in-person meetings versus virtual, and even just the need for a stronger cultural connection. The needs for each organization are unique, so these considerations need to be taken in the context of how each of your coworkers operate. One workspace is going to be different from the next. So, if we take a moment to look at the makeup of an existing workplace, call it the pre-COVID workplace, we see the majority of space is made up of standard workstations that are typically dedicated to a single person. Benching solutions have been increasing over the last few years, primarily replacing standard workstations. Private offices have remained steady, while collaborative spaces make up about 12% of space allocation. As a point of reference, the other portions include ancillary spaces such as restrooms, break rooms, and storage. As we look forward, anticipating a shift to working remotely, we can expect the makeup of the office to shift too. It's driven by why people are in the office and the difference between focus and collaborative work. We can anticipate that focus work can be done in remote spaces, leaving workplaces to cater towards collaborative needs. With that, we will see collaborative spaces occupying more areas, offset by replacing offices and standard workstations with more efficient benching solutions. To clarify, the office won't grow, but to provide more collaborative spaces, but the existing spaces will be reallocated. One of the considerations underlying this change is a shift in how workstations are assigned. The traditional model provides a dedicated workstation for each individual, creating a one-to-one relationship between desk and staff. If staff are working remotely, say 25% of the time, the need to have dedicated workstations or do you have a need to have dedicated workstations? We see in organizations that promote remote work also implement shared models for their workstations. So 25% of the desks aren't empty all the time. Not only does this strategy allow for a pool of 30 desks to support a larger staff population, it also creates opportunities to look further into benching solutions. As the workplace continues to morph and change to offer more flexibility and better technology, all of which have supported an increase in remote work, employees are still expressing a need to feel connected. What is the purpose of the office and how is it changing? The original purpose of the office was to give employees a place to work and tools and resources to get the job done. While today's office is focused more around flexibility, mobility, and employee well-being and happiness, culture and connection are direct factors. Some steps offices have taken to create a stronger sense of connection to staff are recreating the morning coffee break to connect on more of a social level, encouraging friendly competition, or even hosting virtual happy hours.
These are just a couple of the considerations. It's a very complex situation when we talk about transitioning to remote work. But in addition to these ones that we just went through, there's aspects related to technology, for instance, and specifically the upgrading of technology that may be required. An example of that would be increasing bandwidth for internet and connectivity. Or when it comes to integration, one of the things that we struggle with in our industry is replacing simple analog tasks like sketching. And how do we address that when I'm sitting at my house and Lisa's at her house, and we need to have that sort of interaction with one another? You know, we've been able to address that by introducing new laptops, for instance, that have the touch screens that we can draw right on to bridge that technological divide. The other aspect too is cleaning procedures. When we are all sitting in dedicated workstations, you know, that once a day cleaning may be sufficient, but when you start talking about people coming and going regularly, it creates a need for increased cleaning between users, essentially. You know, that may mean that the cleaning providers need to come in more frequently, or implementations of, say, strategies that are used in fitness centers, for example, where staff are asked to wipe down their desks, but after they're done, may be leveraged. That there alone also requires different infrastructure to be provided, or you know, for instance, cleaning stations to be implemented where those resources to clean are provided. There's also conversations to be had around what are the formal office hours. You know, to put it simply, if people are working remotely, does that work need to occur between 9 and 5? Or is there a little bit more flexibility that's provided in that? Does an office, for instance, go from a 10 to 4 schedule to support that? And lastly, there are some considerations around how do you support remote workers? Google released 2 weeks ago, I think now, that they were going to provide a $1,000 stipend to staff to help them create home offices. You know, one of the big complaints that we hear is the effect that chairs are having on people. And Ted is a good example of this one, that he started working from home in his dining room chair, which is designed for eating and temporary sitting, essentially. It's not a chair like we have at our offices that are specifically designed for extended periods of use. So he ended up coming back to the office and smuggling his desk chair out to take that home to help ease some of those aches and pains he was feeling sitting in that chair for an extended period of time there. That brings us into our next topic here, and our next prediction of a focus on healthy workplaces, specifically disease transmission. You may be familiar with such programs as WELL and FitWell. For those who may be hearing that for the first time, those are very similar to LEAD, but they're focused on user well-being. They're reflective of the general current approach to health in the workplace that supports ideas such as access to healthy food, encouraging the use of stairs over elevators through better designing of stairs, and as well as regularly changing of work positions with sit-to-stand desks, for example. Disease transmission is included in those, but it makes up a relatively small portion of the overall discussion within healthy workplaces. Moving forward, we expect this to not just become a talking point within the design process as we're working with our clients, but actually to become more of a best practice. The good news here is that this doesn't have to be a case study of what are the best practices moving forward. Healthcare industry has been doing this for a significantly long period of time, and it really becomes more of a conversation of how do we transition those practices in healthcare to the workplace? Which ones are appropriate to bring over? Which ones may be a little bit of overkill related to workplaces versus the healthcare environments? And that really begins with what is the role that architecture, interiors, and mechanical systems can play in addressing disease transmission. This starts by looking at how disease are transmitted. And if we look at what's on the screen here, there's a couple of things that jump out. For starters, direct contact and vectors, vectors being things like mosquitoes or third parties that carry disease between two people, can be addressed through architectural and interior interventions, but those interventions tend to be very cumbersome to the operations of a organization. It becomes put up significant barriers between everybody, so you can't interact with one another. Airborne transmission is one that can be addressed through our mechanical systems. And then vehicles, when it relates to specifically to the workplace and architecture and interiors, is really about surface and moments of contact that we may have with different surfaces, whether it's a work surface, whether it's in restrooms and fixtures, door handles, any of those moments where we actually come in contact with a surface of any kind. And with that, we'll take a little bit of a look at how we might be able to address these.
Concerns over COVID-19 have sparked renewed interest in antimicrobials and their effect on preventing the spread of coronavirus and other bacteria. Antimicrobials are substances that are toxic to certain organisms such as bacteria, viruses, and fungi, and can be found in nature or chemically engineered products. An example of a common household antimicrobial that I'm sure everyone is familiar with are antimicrobial hand soaps. I know I went through a period of time where if I saw that on a label, I figured it must be superior to any of the other hand soaps out there. Some examples of some antimicrobials found in nature include cork, which contains suberin, which has been found to kill bacteria and viruses such as staph, and helps the tree heal quickly after harvesting, contributing to the sustainability of the material. There's also quartz, which is considered naturally antimicrobial due to its non-porous nature, which isn't conducive for the growth of bacteria and viruses, making it easier to clean. And then there's silver. Silver ions have been shown to kill certain bacteria such as E. coli and staph. Other metals such as copper are beginning to show promise for their ability to reduce the growth of bacteria as well. Engineered antimicrobials are chemical additives found in building products and finishes such as textiles, furnishings, flooring, paint, etc. They can be impregnated into a material like a laminate or applied as a coating to a textile. It's important to note that the EPA defines engineered antimicrobials as pesticides. Many healthcare systems have banned the use of products with antimicrobial additives due to the environmental and health implications, as many other product manufacturers have followed suit. Silestone discontinued their use of their microban quartz due to the negative impacts on health, environment, and even the stone itself. DesignTex discontinued their use of antimicrobial coatings not only because of the health and environmental concerns, but the false sense of security these additives can create, leading to less stringent infection control measures. And even Hayworth opted not to partner with Microban based on the Healthier Hospitals Initiative recommendation to minimize the use of antimicrobials, which can inadvertently upset the balance of good and bad bacteria found in the environment. Antimicrobials do kill germs under certain conditions, but when coated on a surface like a fabric or added to a material like a countertop, there typically isn't enough of a dosage level used to make them effective. According to the CDC, there are no natural or chemical antimicrobial products that have been found to kill or prevent COVID-19 or other coronaviruses, and there is no indication that any of the antimicrobial products available lower the rate of infection. And while natural antimicrobials can contribute to reducing the number of bad bacteria, they should never take the place of proper cleaning and disinfectant measures. Which is a nice segue into understanding the difference between cleaning and disinfecting. Most of us assume cleaning is disinfecting and disinfecting is cleaning. This is not the case. Cleaning is accomplished with soap and water and removes dirt and grime and some portions of bacteria, while disinfecting refers to using chemicals to kill germs on a surface. The CDC recommends a minimum of a 10-to-1 bleach solution for proper disinfecting of surfaces. Healthcare environments use harsher cleaning agencies such as QUAT, and any finish or textile that is approved to clean with these types of cleaning agents are approved to do so as long as the manufacturer's recommended maintenance procedures are followed. When a finish or textile fails, it's usually because the recommended cleaning procedures were not followed. There are other cleaning considerations to take into account to make sure that you are cleaning and disinfecting appropriately and also not compromising or damaging your surfaces and materials. There is contact time, which is also known as dwell time or kill time, the amount of time recommended by the manufacturer that a disinfectant is required to be on the surface to be effective. And then there's rinsing. Rinsing is a crucial step in the cleaning and disinfecting process and how those cleaners affect the surfaces they are on. Think about this. Would you even consider washing your hands with soap and then not rinsing them, or running a load of laundry and skipping the rinse cycle? It's the same thing for finishes and textiles. Because it's important to follow the manufacturer's recommended cleaning procedures, it's also important to include your facility's maintenance team in on these discussions so they too understand what is needed from them and any additional time implications it may require.
Beyond interior finishes and cleaning procedures, there's a number of ways we can, strategies that we can implement as well to remove contact points. I'm sure everybody's used touchless fixtures, whether it be at restrooms, automatic doors. There's many other similar devices that remove that need to come in direct contact with surfaces. Utilizing these automated components drastically reduce the need to touch the potentially contaminated surfaces. There's also some products out there that take this a step further. The top image here is of a Dyson product that merges the hand washing and the drying into one step. So instead of washing your hands in one location, transferring across the room and drying them off and potentially carrying contaminations across the space, you end up keeping that all contained within that one area around the sink. There's also some less technologically advanced solutions there. The bottom image here is a shoe grab that provides a low-tech solution for removing contact points with our most critical piece, which is our hands. That's where most of the concern is with the transmission of diseases through our hands as we touch ourselves and we touch other objects. These solutions are relatively quick to install and provide pretty good cost savings over some of the automated ones. There's also an opportunity to take a step back and fundamentally look at how we design spaces. I'm sure everybody's used a restroom that has a door, as well as restrooms that haven't had a door. Right now, a lot of that's driven by the need to move people through in a timely manner. So you see a lot of doorless restrooms in places like airports or stadiums versus in office environments. But the fundamental functionality between those two design concepts really is just about how do you take out that moment of contact there. We can apply that same idea to, say, our conference rooms, among other spaces within the buildings. You know, typically we design these as sealed, closed-off spaces that support a lot of private conversations. But in reality, and this depends on the industry for sure, but in reality, a lot of those conversations don't need to occur in that private space. So looking forward, one of the things that we can start to implement is a transition in our conference rooms to move them into a more open environment, create more alcoves, if you will, with them, that they still provide that intimate meeting solution, but those moments of contact and that level of privacy is reduced. There's definitely going to be a balance moving forward between providing a more open conference room and the private ones. You know, all organizations are going to have that need for private conferences, but it's finding that balance between the two that can help us create a healthier workplace overall. Another strategy that we can start to look at and implement is increasing the number of access points into enclosed spaces, such as conference rooms. One of the big issues that we see in addressing COVID right now, specifically the social distancing guidelines, that 6-foot requirement that's being put out there, is these pinch points that we have moving into and out of enclosed spaces. By providing at least one other access point into the rooms, it gives us this opportunity to create one-way circulation routes that help to address those and maintain that proper social spacing.
Another thing COVID has taught us is that we really need to retool and rethink how we design our workspaces, keeping employee health and well-being in the forefront of everyone's mind. Furniture planning and layouts can play a crucial role in reducing the spread of infection, and geometry and density are two strategies that we'll talk about in more detail. Geometry strategies can be used to promote continued health and safety. Some furniture solutions are designed to offer this type of flexibility, while others need to be selected with purpose. Some examples of adaptable geometry include reorienting benching solutions away from the standard linear approach, reconfiguring desks to reduce sitting face-to-face, thus eliminating the need for a barrier, or even rotating desks 90 degrees just to face away from each other. You can also utilize open meeting spaces with flexible seating in lieu of conference rooms for meeting groups larger than 4 people, which gives the individuals control over distancing. Density also needs to be considered when faced with public health concerns and how that relates to the design of a space. Simple strategies to reduce density include utilizing ancillary spaces as additional workspaces to help with social distancing. You can take a 10-person conference room and remove 4 of the chairs, converting it to a 6-person conference room to help reduce density. You can separate desks to increase distancing and increase technology to support the ease of remote work. Reducing density and introducing more technology is going to be key to supporting flexible workspaces, different work styles, and even possible future health crises.
With mechanical systems, there are quite a few aspects that we could talk about for a very long time, but I'll start by simply mentioning some options for reducing aerosols or airborne pathogens, and these could include measures like optimizing airflow patterns within a space, controlling zone pressurization, could be in-room air cleaning with HEPA filter units, maybe fan-powered units, personalized ventilation of local exhaust ventilation at the source. It could be UVGI, which we're hearing quite a bit about these days, even though it's been around for a long time, ultraviolet germicidal irradiation. Most offices, most buildings don't have humidifiers, but if we do, then boosting humidity is an effective measure. 40% relative humidity is a number that's often cited, and it's well studied as a minimum humidity level. But even if you can't do that, 35%, even 30% is still a good number to hit. A couple specific things, however, that I want to consider and just touch on are outside air, or dilution, and then filtration. And improving what we do with both of these can apply to both new designs and can reasonably be done with existing systems. As we've talked about, we want to think about how what we do today will apply down the road. And for example, regarding ventilation systems, we're working with a client right now on an exercise where we go and inspect all their ventilation systems and even rewrite portions of their control system sequences of operations. But the sequences are not just a COVID-19 sequence where we bring in more fresh air. We're actually looking to implement a broader emergency mode where really any pandemic or any need to increase ventilation rates can be easily done with the push of a button. And sequences like this might also disable, for example, demand controlled ventilation strategies that are currently in place, where you reduce overall airflow, overall outside air based on carbon dioxide monitoring or something like that. So you may want to disable those with an emergency mode as well. When we talk about increasing ventilation, then at a minimum, we want to comply with ASHRAE 62.1 ventilation standards. And that can mean different things for different buildings. From there, maybe we're looking at increasing ventilation rates beyond that. And for that, you'll want to consider things like system configuration, heating and cooling capacity. Basically, in other words, what can your system handle? So increasing ventilation as much as practical can be done best if we are smart about our controls. And for example, how can we enhance economizer modes to bring in more outside air when conditions make sense? Are there reset schedules that we can program? Can we base outdoor air quantities on current loads? Maybe we look to bring in more outside air in off-peak times, either with respect to weather or even off-peak times with respect to internal loads such as occupancy. And then when it comes to reducing the potential for virus spread through airstreams, filtration is a proven measure. And most office air handling systems tend to have MERV 8 filters. So MERV stands for minimum efficiency reporting value. And a MERV 8 filter, it will not stop airborne viruses. It essentially has 0% containment. But if we upgrade to say MERV 13, we can stop about, and this is approximate, but about 50% of the smallest respiratory droplets, which is pretty good. And for many systems, that's a good level that considers other factors such as the ability of your fans to handle higher filter pressures and so forth. If we step it up from MERV 13 to say MERV 14, that brings us to about 75% capture on the smallest respiratory droplets. So those are some examples. These two concepts, adjusting ventilation to increase overall dilution and improving air filtration at central air handlers, they're measures that apply to most existing buildings and are things that we need to look going forward as we design new buildings as well. And I'll just say this too, that commissioning of mechanical systems, it's long been recognized as something that's important to do, but for these types of items, it becomes very important. It's important to get your eyes on systems, whether they're, again, existing or new. And just, I'll close with this example. If we go and check filters and we find that we have only a 1/2 inch gap around, say, a MERV 15 filter, that 1/2 inch gap allows 25% bypass air, which essentially takes that MERV 15 filter down to a MERV 8 level in its effectiveness. So it's important to commission. And I just want to touch on a few of these items as some things to think about mechanically, just a few of many considerations.
As we get close to the end of our time here, we move to our last prediction of a need for a more agile workplace. And what we mean by that is increasing the ability of our workplaces to adapt to ever-changing conditions. COVID came with a certain set of criteria that we needed to adapt for. Past pandemics and epidemics such as polio and measles had certain criteria that we had to adjust for. And moving forward, we don't know what those conditions are going to be or what we need to look out for, whether it is on the health side or say on the economic side. And there's quite a few strategies that we can start to implement. And to touch base on a couple of those, when we look at spaces specifically, how can spaces start to multi-function for us? You know, this image is of a break room. It's, you know, nothing crazy, nothing over the top, but some simple elements of it help it to become multifunctional. Specifically, this counter surface that you see going around the perimeter here is a great way to create some flexibility within the space. As we are addressing social distancing, moving back to the workspace, it tends to mean a de-densification of our work areas, which means people are being displaced. So we need to find other places for them to work. You know, this counter provides a great opportunity there. And part of that is because it was thought about ahead of time, and that there's Wi-Fi in the building. There's also outlets. You can probably see a couple of them on the back wall there that support the ability of somebody to walk up with, say, a laptop, sit down, plug in, and be off and working. Very simple, very easy transition. The continuity of that countertop also allows some flexibility in distancing between the chairs. 6 feet has been the recommended distance for COVID. The next pandemic, maybe 4, maybe 8, and maybe 10. We don't know what it's going to be, but creating that continuous work surface allows for that to quickly adapt and change over time. And then lastly, the positioning of this and being on that perimeter wall, it keeps everybody facing towards the exterior of the building, so everybody's facing a wall versus facing directly into another person and breathing on one another and transmitting disease that way. And while this works in this environment, these same ideas and this conceptual approach that we can implement small, simple strategies into various spaces, including break rooms, conference rooms, even lobbies, can create agility within that workplace to help us adapt as our conditions change and evolve.
Designing for agile working is all about creating a flexible and productive work environment. Agile working means you are working remotely from your desk, but still in the building. You are provided all of the amenities needed to perform your work without a dedicated workstation. There are 3 core zones to an agile workspace, being a breakout space, quiet zones, and touchdown spaces, all of which furniture plays a large role in. Breakout spaces use smaller tables that can accommodate 2 to 4 people with Wi-Fi access and charging stations throughout. Things like brainstorming sessions typically happen here. Informal meeting spaces provide a more casual lounge-like feel, so furniture with an open and welcoming use like sofas, lounge chairs, coffee tables, etc., work best in these types of applications. And then there's the quiet zones, which offer spaces where focused work can happen and where privacy might be required. Phone booths or partially enclosed areas are provided for these spaces. Touchdown spaces provide a space for teams to meet and work collaboratively or have the flexibility to work separately. So you could do tables on casters to allow team members to pull side by side for collaboration and then pull apart to work independently. And the image there is a nice representation of that type of a flexible conferencing space. Agile spaces can also inadvertently support remote work by having already addressed increased technology needs to support this nomadic work style. And the combination of agile working and remote working can better position companies to have in place the flexibility needed to address future health crises.
Okay, with that essentially concludes our presentation for the day. I want to thank you again for your attention out there. Even you multitaskers, we appreciate it. Just a quick recap, prediction 1, the increase in remote work. Prediction 2, a focus on disease transmission. And prediction 3, the need for agile workspaces. And with that, we'll turn it back over. Thank you again. Appreciate being here.
Thank you so much, Ted, Steve, Lisa. We do have about 10 minutes available here for questions. Do we have any questions from the audience today? And while we're waiting to see if as those come in, do any of our panelists have any idea have any specific ideas on the more explicit ways that an office manager or facility manager may be able to leverage this process to increase future sustainability?
Steve, do you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, can you clarify that a little bit?
Let's say environmental improvements to the facility.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of immediate improvements that can be taken, a lot of it comes down to making sure that we aren't investing in resources that are temporary. And it comes down to, that example we tossed out before, plexiglass, right? That's a manufactured material. It's not a renewable material. And we're seeing that pop up all over the place, that if, we can get out ahead of this and think about what is going to be the longer lasting pieces, it gives us that opportunity to make sure that the investments now are both, financially responsible as well as environmentally responsible. To the discussion of materials that Lisa presented, cork, for instance, it's not just a, good as an antimicrobial and provides some of those properties. It's also a renewable material that has some environmental benefits related to it as well.
So pulling some questions from the audience here. What do you think the new best practice for square foot per worker should be moving forward?
So for a while, I'm trying to remember back here off the top of my head, it was about 120 square feet per person. And what has historically happened is that's historically come down, but it's kind of hit this plateau where it's remained consistent. And it really comes down to not downsizing offices any further, but reevaluating the types of workspaces that we have and how they function. In the breakdowns that we provided earlier, looking at what is it today versus what is it, potentially in the future, it's not about downsizing, it's about reallocating that space. As people move from, your typical 8x8 workstations to a benching solution, which are much more efficient, that space needs to be supplemented with additional collaborative or breakout areas, for instance. As you move from a owned workstation model to a shared workstation model, there's other things that come along with that. I'm sure many of us keep our personal items and our tools and pens and pencils, paper, et cetera, sitting at our workstations, right? But if you're now sharing that workstation with other people, you need to provide a supplemental space to store those things. So a lot of times what we end up seeing is, say, lockers being introduced into it for people to keep those day-to-day activities or those day-to-day tools that they need available and at the ready for them versus, carrying a backpack in every single day with all your all the things that you need. So it's really a reallocation of the space, not necessarily a reduction of the overall office space.
When you use the term agile today, did you mean general flexibility or the agile work mode recently adopted from the IT and technology world?
In terms of like how furniture plays a role in agile working?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's also an emerging term in the technology world. but I think it's a different connotation.
Yeah, it really is. Agile working in the workplace is really, and that's what we were trying to differentiate between, you know, there's flexible spaces, but then there's truly like agile working spaces. And we've got some of the big three manufacturers in town that have really great representations of these type of spaces. And again, agile working means you're not at an assigned desk, but you're working in these flex spaces in your office building versus the difference between remote working is you're just working off site.
How do you see public lounge and soft furniture design changing as antimicrobial textiles are not proven to kill germs?
I think, you know, in response maybe to like a coronavirus or any kind of a future health concern, and it seems like a lot of the manufacturers that we as interior designers have talked to recently, everybody seems to be going away from it because of the environmental and health concerns in, you know, using those in products. I think that's really going to be more about like the ease of maintenance, maybe like the design of the pieces or design elements within the space. They're going to be more simplistic in design. They're going to be easy to wipe down, you know, instead of everybody loves like the really beautiful upholstered pieces and really, you know, more expensive fabrics, but those are definitely harder to clean. And I think you're going to see an increase, at least in the short term, of maybe going and implementing more vinyls because again, they're easier to clean and wipe down.
Has there been any research about dishwashers? Can we continue to use washable, reusable dishes and silverware if the dishwasher has a sanitized setting?
I can't comment on that one.
Yeah, I was going to say, I personally haven't come across anything either way. I haven't heard any discussions either way on that. It's an interesting question, though.
Yeah, I just think of, you know, I could chime in generally here, and if I think, you know, mechanical design, and we do a fair amount of designs and laboratories and so forth, and, you know, there's, as long as things are being sanitized and, you know, in healthcare research environments where you have sterilizers and autoclaves and that type of level of sanitization, then, you know, obviously they reuse all their very expensive instruments, and, you know, a dishwasher I would think would probably be similar as long as we can sanitize. It would seem to be reasonable. That said, like Lisa and Steve, I can't speak totally to the utensil question.
Yeah, I guess the other thought that I can toss out there is, you know, COVID is one situation here that we're addressing and dealing with, and just disease in general. That when we do get, you know, as the CDC suggests, that we're going to see these more frequently, we're going to adapt in, you know, probably similar ways that we have today. So if we're at these peak moments of disease concern and transmission and in a pandemic level, we're probably going to have, you know, remote work is going to be another thing that we're doing. We're going to be doing social distancing, and I guess I would take that in consideration too with looking at some of these other aspects of how do we maintain health and well-being.
How do you balance as you promote remote work the desire for to reduce square footage through things like hoteling and implement shared workspaces with the natural discomfort of sharing other employees' space when you do have to come in?
Policies are a big one that you see. Change management is another one. Many places that do have the shared workspace implement a clean desk policy, if you will, where you leave it the way you came. So you don't necessarily feel like you are sitting in somebody else's workspace, if that makes sense. You know, humans are also naturally creatures of habit, that while you may have, say, 30 workstations sitting out there and you can pick to choose and sit in any one, you're probably going to end up sitting in the same one or in the same area pretty regularly. But that is one of the big challenges, especially, you know, in the US, where the culture of the workplace is, you know, family photos are up all over the place, right? Where you go to places in Europe, for instance, where it's a very different culture around the workplace. And that's where that change management aspect comes into play of how do you help your organization adapt, evolve, and embrace ultimately the new work environment.
Would it also create concerns about safety and virus transmission, whether actual or perceived?
Steve, I want to just jump in here for a second, but yeah, I really think in everything that, you know, I've been told is that, especially in the light of we're, you know, moving into post-COVID now, that in applications like that, there's going to have to be a change in like some cleaning procedures that are implemented, because yes, I totally agree with you. In the short term, the days of just, I'm going to wipe down my desk and clean everything up and walk out, we're not back there yet. So it will involve a change in cleaning procedure policies from the organization.
As a final question, do you think we will begin to see buildings and architecture with opening walls and large windows for airflow?
That's one thing that we've discussed, and while it may seem like a good idea at the moment, we want to consider the aspects of the mechanical systems. I'll let Ted, you jump in on this one here too, that bringing in significant outside airflow has impacts on our mechanical systems. You know, as well as every time we have an operable window or a door, for that matter, or anything like that, it affects the overall building performance because it's a moment of leakage for the building.
Yeah, that's correct. And with windows, it's something that myself, having done quite extensive existing building commissioning and energy work, we do see over time where you have operable windows and you get leakage with those, but also just windows that get left open. And that's something that has to be dealt with. And then we have air coming in uncontrolled, which can be comfort issues, but often it's, in the past, people have done that in spaces because they have comfort issues. So that's their solution, but then the problem never goes away, and you have, you know, you're heating all this outside air that you don't need to be bringing it in. So you have less control ability in that, obviously, if you have operable windows. But, you know, operable windows have been around for a long time, and natural ventilation is an acceptable way to ventilate, depending on spaces. I think from a mechanical standpoint, there's adequate and better ways to do it through your HVAC systems.
And to answer the question a little more directly, I would say, yeah, we'll probably see it. Will it be adapted as a best practice? I would question that at the moment. And when it does come to sustainability, as Ted was mentioning, if you can design it to be a truly naturally ventilated facility, then that's a very feasible way to do it. But just to pop a few operable windows into, you know, say a standard office building, that's where it becomes a little bit of a, is that really the best thing to do?
Thank you so much, Steve, Ted, Lisa. I think that was a great informational presentation today. Thank you all of our attendees and participants for joining us on your lunch hour. We hope to see you back next week for understanding and implementing business continuity planning. Again, thank you, Steve, Ted, and Lisa.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.